What does it take to start and build a civil engineering company from scratch? In today's episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, I have with me Scott Harvey-Lewis. Scott is the president and founder of Building Mavens. Scott has really worked at every level of engineering in his career, from a staff engineer to a leader to now the CEO founder of Building Mavens. And he shares some amazing advice in this episode on people leadership, how to understand your team members, how to build the right culture, how to build your team up. And I'm so thrilled to share Scott's advice with you. Let's do it. So Scott, I want to start by welcoming you to the Civil Engineering CEO. Welcome aboard.
Appreciate the invite. And as always, I look forward to our chat. So glad to be here.
Yeah, for sure. It was a while ago we spoke on our Engineering Career Coach podcast. It went over really well. And since then, you've done some new stuff in your career. So we're excited to have you back. So why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of what it is that you do on a daily basis today, Scott?
Sure. So about in the 20th year of my career, and I've really gone through each rank, so to speak. And at some point before I formed my company, I was in charge of offices and people and managing business units and so on. So I went from being a staff engineer or even a drafter all the way to managing 70 plus people. So nowadays, though, now that I formed the company, what I really focus on a daily basis is how do I win work and keep the pipeline open, keep the backlog there for the team, and also how do I staff the work. So that's really my two main functions right now, is getting talent and really making sure that we have a steady flow of new jobs and recurring projects.
Awesome. And I want to get into, you starting your company in just a minute here. But before I do that, I just want to go back to what you said there. So you've obviously have kind of been in kind of every aspect or every level of the engineering profession. Like you said, you started out doing the technical work. Then you started doing some managerial work at the company you work for, leadership, building teams, building up people, and ultimately made the decision to start your own company. Tell me a little bit about one of the things that's challenging for engineers is those other skills.
Yeah.
So tell me about your ability. Was it something where you recognized, hey, I'm pretty good at these skills? Was there things you had to do early on to really flesh that out? Talk to us about that, because that was obviously a big lead up to you being able to start your own company.
Yeah. So in growing as a professional and doing multiple personality tests and working skills and just now having a better idea of who I am and what my strengths are, I know I am definitely more geared towards sales, management, taking care of teams, rallying teams, talking with clients. I'm more outgoing. So I think, naturally speaking, my skills lend better to a forward-facing position. And I think part of being an engineer or anybody is like you have to recognize where your skills really are, right? So if you say, I want to be a salesman because they make the best commissions, but you really aren't a personable person, it's going to be very hard for you to sell, even if you have the best training, right? Because your desire really doesn't line up with that. So I think in my career, I've had opportunities to do different things, but I really love that side of the business. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because somebody else may have the exact same training, but they really love the technical side of the business. So when you start your day, really, where do you kind of lean towards? Because you could have the same plate, but for me, I would go to let me win work first, where somebody might say, let me finish my report and I'll get to following up to the clients later. And so I think naturally everybody has to do an honest self-check. Like, what do you really like? Because at the end of the day, one or the other isn't really better, because you could be a really technical expert in your field and all you do is an expert witness report and you sit before juries and before the clients and you explain the technical thing, where somebody else could be really all day selling and doing presentations and not doing anything technical, but they still could be at the top of their career and top of their chain. So I think in my career, though, I've had many opportunities and my personality and skills really lend nicely towards that side of the business. And so at the end of the day, running a firm and being responsible for clients and really the profitability of the whole ship is something that I'm comfortable with and I do well at.
Yeah, and I think that everything you said there, Scott, is really important, because I think sometimes in a lot of consulting firms, they make it out that if you don't have these skills, like the ability to go out and build business, you don't have the leadership skills, that you can't be successful, which is not a great thing, right? Because if you're someone who's really technically savvy, you want to do technical work at a high level. And if you're going to build a consulting firm, you're going to need people that can do both. And so I think the idea of kind of understanding your skill sets, and then as you go into leadership, understanding your team members' skill sets and being able to kind of put the right people in the right seats, including yourself, is really, really critical in terms of building a team or building an organization. And, I'm glad you explained it that way, because I think that sometimes engineers make the assumption that they have to be able to do all these things, and it's not necessary. Not everyone can do all these things, and not everyone likes all those things. So that's really important to understand.
And the fact is, it's okay, right? Because again, you even, like, for instance, I've done many, many classes in structural design. I've done wood design. I've done all these sort of things. But when I leave that presentation or class, I don't feel like I want to keep that knowledge, right? It's not something that really drives my passion. But when I go to a class on sales or how to manage businesses, that stuff feeds me in a different way, and I want to learn more. And so I think I could have all this knowledge, but if I have to do a wood design right now, I'm going to be like, man, I got to really brush up. But I don't need to brush up on how to sell somebody, because it comes naturally. So I think, like you said, not everybody can be what the pinnacle of maybe the company's, viewpoint of a practice builder or seller doer, rainmaker. Not everybody can reach that level. And that's okay, because like you said, you do need individuals who are responsible for the actual technical product. And that's just as important in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time I tell our clients, like, you should have more technical professionals than leaders, or else you're going to have a problem in your company. If there's a whole bunch of leaders and a couple of technical people, how can you do engineering projects successfully? So with that being said, Scott, tell us about your company, Building Mavens. What inspired you to start the company? What services do you offer? Tell us about that part of your journey.
So it was like a perfect convergence of a few things. So the first thing that really was the light bulb for me was that I was at a place in my career that no matter who I interviewed with or wanted to hire me would say basically the same thing. They'd say, well, what can you do for us? And how much could you bring in? And then I'd ask questions like, well, if I do this, what's next? And nobody could really answer what's next. It really is maybe something the industry has to think about. Nobody wants to give a clear path until the person has done maybe, let's say, the impossible, or really overperform what they want from them first, and then they may come back with something, but there really is never really a clear when and how and metrics. So I was just running into that a lot. And then the other part to that was, not only was it not unclear what would happen if I did this, it was also, well, we want you not only to win the work, do the work, and then once it gets to a certain point, we may provide support, but we want you to staff an office. It was just always, seeming like, well, I'm going to have to do everything myself anyway if I want to make a certain level of income and so on. So that was always the conversation. It was with like 3 or 4 or 5 firms. And in my mind, it was always maybe a multiple of 3 to 4x of what I wanted to make if I wanted to make that, right? So it's like, if I want to make X, I got to bring in 4x. And so part of me was thinking, well, if everybody wants me to bring in 4x to make X, is there a chance I can just bring in X for myself? And so that was one thought. Yeah. The second thing was that, in managing companies for other people, inevitably you're going to have some friction at the top, because, if it's their company, they want it one way and you may have it another way. And so you're going to always be rubbing egos, and that gets tiring, right? Because if you really think your way is right, or you want to try something different, it is somewhat disappointing if you're shut down, because it's just like, hey, it's not your company. So there was that too. And then lastly, in the industry, there was the collapse, which was, a significant event in Florida where the laws changed. There was a huge awareness for safety and inspections that really fell into what I did. And so I'd spent many years working with condominiums and doing recertification inspections, expert witness work, and managing teams in that sector. So I saw an opportunity where there was a possibility of steady work coming in. Mm-hmm. And I was at the point in my career where it was just like, anyway I turn, it's really going to be reliant on me to win work and establish teams. And I just said, you know what, maybe I should do it myself. And I had a few conversations with other CEOs and individuals. And one thing that stuck out to me, well, it was actually two things. One was one individual said they were at a point in their career like me, where when they look back, they regretted it that they didn't start their own firm. And so they asked me, would I regret it even if I took the best opportunity on the table, would I have some regret of not trying it for myself? And the answer was yes. So that was one thing. And then the next thing was, one person asked me, well, what's the best offer on the table? And I told them, and they said, well, what do you think you're going to do for this firm? And I said, well, I'm going to bring in millions and millions of dollars for them, right? And they said, well, it sounds like they value you more than you value yourself. And I was like, that's an interesting concept. So with those two things, am I devaluing myself, and would I regret not starting a business? I was like, you know what? Talk to the wife. Everybody was on board, and I was just like, let's see where this goes. Let me give myself, maybe 6 months of time just to see where it goes. And, from day one, it was profitable. So it really, and it also really sat well with the way I like to feel and be compensated. So I think at the end of the day, it was the right move for me.
That's great. I mean, I think that having done the same thing myself, I know that there's a lot of, hurdles to starting your own business. Some of it just being mental, right? Mm-hmm. Like confidence. I'm going out on a limb. I got a family, there's a lot on the line here. Like you said, there's companies saying, hey, we'll pay you this much money, which is basically guaranteed. I think me personally, I think there's some excitement in like not knowing like what you're going to make every year, right? There's risk, but there's excitement, right?
Yeah.
So you start this company, and a big part of starting a company, of course, in the beginning is you're kind of really rolling up your sleeves. You're doing a lot of stuff on your own, and then you're building a team, which I know you're building your team up consistently. Talk a little bit about your management style. Like if I were to ask some of the people that work with you about your management style, how do you think they would describe you?
It's either like I'm your best friend or worst enemy. But I think what I've realized is I'm a high performer. So it's like, I know I have a high expectation of myself, and I, if you're talking about a sports team, like I play hard. So I come to work every day, and I'm going to give it my best. And I expect whoever's working with me that they're going to give it their best. So if I'm working with people who have the right intentions and have high motivation and high drive, then I just see myself as a coach, because I think everybody has their strengths. And I think I have a good discernment of who is good at what. And then my goal is to arrange the team that the work flows to the right person, and that everybody is really operating at their best usage. So for anyone that is really good at what they do, doesn't want micromanagement, wants somebody who supports them and gives them the tools and encourages them and coaches them, but expects results, then really it's great working with me. If it's somebody who wants an easy day, who just wants to come to work, do the minimum, or just do what's, though like a C plus, then it's going to be hard, because I expect the A performer, right? And that's where the disconnect is. So what I've really established here at Building Mavens is not only do I just look at the resume and just say, hey, this person has let's call it the briefcase or tools and skills to do it, but also like what's their heart like, right? What is their motivations? And then also, are they mentally capable for the role as well? So, instead of it just being a gut check of, is this person right? It really should have some level of science and data behind the hire, because at the end of the day, do our personalities match? Is the role right for their true passion? And I think if all of that aligns as best as it can, then there's a higher potential of success for that person, not only in the role, but in the organization as well.
Yeah, no, I really love that. I mean, the idea of, let's support our team, but let's expect a lot from them, and put those two things together, and, find the people that can thrive in an atmosphere like that. And then that comes back to the hiring process, which you mentioned. And I think that's really important. I mean, listen, when we started EMI, it was like we found a couple of people, we started working with them, and we would like, let's see how it goes, right? But as you grow your company, the stakes are higher, right? So if you make a big hire and it doesn't work out, it can really set back an organization. And you have a culture now, and you want to bring the right person into that culture, or else that can also cause problems. Yeah. So we've really made it a point to improve our hiring process, including more interviews in a process, references, different things that we talk to people about kind of lined up with what you said, right? Really understanding what their career goals are. I think the last thing that you want is someone taking a job just because they want to make more money, because that never ends well, right? But obviously, if they're in the right atmosphere, they can certainly make money and support their family and, be supported in doing that. So I really like the stuff that you're talking about there, because that's building a culture, not just a company.
Yeah. And I like to, all of us need motivation. All of us need to keep learning. And just because you are the owner or the person in charge doesn't mean that you don't need to be pushed as well, right? So if you're working with a bunch of mediocrity, then your standard is going to fall. Whereas if you're working with a lot of talent and people pushing your thoughts, pushing the creativity, then the company is going to move forward, because every day somebody can lead, right? And it's hard when you're always having to lead and pull everybody and pull the quality and pull the motivation. It will drain you. And so what I like is to be able to see the team and they push me as well. And also it's more fun, because if you're playing a sport and everybody's playing at a high level, it's going to be a much more fun game. But if you're the one guy that's trying to pull the team, it's going to be tiring every game you play. And so in starting the company, I really wanted not to focus on quantity, but more like each hire, is it a quality hire? And not only that, I'd rather have clients waiting for us than us having, the proper staffing, but there's disparity in how people perform. So it really is a good opportunity to kind of pivot and just focus on maybe more boutique services and high level than just, anything that comes in we'll do, and here's a person, just get it done so we can make some money.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really important point. If you're the leader of an organization and you're not getting, if your team's not comfortable challenging you, right, then it's going to be hard for you to grow personally and for the company to grow. And I love that here when people are saying, like, why aren't we doing it this way? And I'm like, it's a good question. We should explore that. And if we should do it that way, if you have a good plan in place for that, let's look at it.
Right.
And people need to be comfortable enough to say that. And that's where you create that atmosphere that's so important.
Yeah.
So, Scott, let's talk about technology. Technology is obviously, fundamental today in building a business the right way. How does technology play into your work at Building Mavens, and kind of how do you see it shaping the future of the civil engineering industry that you're kind of sitting in?
Everyone who comes into the firm right now, whether it's a consultant, anybody reviewing the systems, always compliments them, because they're like, wow, you're running the company on much more advanced systems than where you are. And so I feel technology is just as important as anything, probably the most important thing with the business, because as it comes to billing, managing workflows, communications in a hybrid environment, how can you have disparate systems and really be efficient, right? So the goal was to build a company that you could really work anywhere and be able to get things to clients efficiently, be able to have meetings with a client and pull up documents and have true access. And in doing so, I've hired consultants to build a system. It wasn't just me thinking, well, I'm going to start a business. How do I build? Let me get QuickBooks. Let me use Excel. Let me use the cheapest stuff to just get going, and then I'll figure it out. I used all the knowledge and research I'd done at previous companies and just put the money into investing into the company from the beginning. And that way the company can scale, as opposed to I have to now redo systems or reintegrate. And so far it's been, I tell people the way the company feels right now is if we have to go from here to Miami, which, is, let's just call it 100 miles. This company right now is like a very fast motorbike. You can just jump on it and you'll get there quickly, as opposed to some companies that may be a dump truck, because it's just so heavy to move that we're going to get to the point a lot faster. And the clients feel it and appreciate it too, because the delivery systems and everything are top notch, and there's still room for growth. So as AI comes into the picture, now the question is, how do we integrate AI into systems, right? Whereas somebody else maybe have trepidation of something because it's not the way they've done it before. I feel I'm different. I welcome the new tools, the new systems, because, for instance, here's a good example. Back in the day, everybody used a hard server, right? The cloud wasn't in existence, and many people were and probably still are scared of the cloud, right? It's like, ooh, what's the cloud? Or, is the data secure? And there may be some truth to the securities and stuff, but the cloud is the way to go, right? It's if you're going to stick with physical servers and not move to the cloud, then you're going to be behind. And so the way I see it is, if that's the way it's going, then let's keep moving, keep rebuilding, and keep optimizing the systems, because the world is not going to stop for us. And you can really see when the trends are pushing. So I think technology is super important. And that's my goal with the companies, that anybody sits in their cockpit, so to speak, they have all the tools, all the softwares, AI assistants, whatever it is, that they can be as efficient as possible with the least friction when it comes to tools and softwares and systems.
And with regards to, remote work, hybrid work, since inception, have you guys been remote, or how has that looked, and how's that?
So I set the company up to be hybrid, but there's no rigid rule of you have to be in the office 1 day a week or 2 days or 3, because what I feel, there's 2 levels to this. Everyone I work with is, well, let's call it mid-level to senior in what they do. So they don't need the hand-holding of maybe an entry-level engineer that's their first day on the job, which it could be hard to be fully remote, right? So I'll put that caveat out there. But I do think that in a hybrid environment, everybody's circumstance and preference is different, right? So even though there's a hybrid do as you please, someone may want to go into the office because, let's say, they have kids running around the house and it's very hard to concentrate at home. So they want to be in the office, and they'll be in the office more than somebody else who likes to be home because they're more focused when they don't have people to talk to. And so I think in a hybrid environment, if there's a reason that somebody has to be there on a certain day because of a meeting or team catch up, then yes, you stress a day. But just to say, hey, show up 3 days a week, I think will frustrate people, because what if Wednesday's not a good day? What if Wednesday's a better day? So I think any setup should be free-flowing in a way that it best promotes the efficiency of the employee and the need. Because if somebody is struggling remotely, then maybe they do need to come into the office and meet with the manager. And so it should be a way that it's not rigid and really suits the person and the circumstance and the need at the time.
So you have an office location, but it's just there's not a rigid schedule as to who needs to come in when. Yeah.
And the team and I, we have teams, again, we have technology. So we meet and we do lunches. We do more things that are not outside the office if we're meeting together. And in what we do, there's a lot more inspections that you're on site, a lot more than maybe a traditional firm. So there really is, it wouldn't really work well to demand somebody to come to the office, because so much time would be wasted on commuting and different things, that it's better they dictate what they need for the day. And if we do need to meet, then we'll call a meeting and meet at the central location.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that speaks to what you talked about earlier in like finding the right people for your team, right? When you have the right people, you can kind of, like you said earlier, you don't need to necessarily micromanage people. You give them the support they need. There's an office if you want to come to the office. If you don't have to. You know what you need to accomplish, and we're here to support you, type of thing. And I think that goes a long way with people,
Yeah, and in over 2 years of, let's say, being mostly remote, I've never looked back and said, well, you know what, we should have spent more time together in the office. That's never, on a daily basis, never a thought that comes up that says, man, this remote, where's everybody? Are they working?
Right.
Because we've never made it a thing in any direction. It's just, here's the systems. If somebody wants to be in the office, there's a place to go. If you want to stay home, here's the best equipment. Here's the best systems. If we want to talk, there's Teams. So it really hasn't swung one way or the other, but at the end of the day, people have just gravitated to having a great setup at home and working at home.
Right. And it's flexibility. That's great. So Scott, you hear a lot today in the industry about diversity and inclusion. What does that mean to you, and how does Building Mavens kind of promote these values within your teams, within your projects?
When I get asked that question, it's hard for me to answer, and here's why. Because I grew up in a different country. So in the country I grew up, which was Jamaica, never in my life did I ever feel discrimination based on me as a person, right? Like,
right.
My color. I've never felt like somebody else is less than me because of their color or gender or whatever it is. I've never really grew up in an environment that you sense that, or it's pushed. In Jamaica, it's more about class, right? Do you have money?
Right.
Really? And even so, it wasn't like you're discriminated against. It's just people with more money had more opportunity and so on. So coming to America, to the United States, it's hard to pick it up sometimes unless it's like blatant. But looking back in my career and talking to people, it's obviously a problem, right? So what I've seen though is that at the end of the day, that's something that's really deep down in somebody, right? So it doesn't matter how many slogans you put out or how many catchy terms or, saying that we are inclusive and setting up officers and whatever it is. It doesn't, at the end of the day, none of that stuff matters because it really comes down to the person of the heart, right? And if people in power, real power, don't care about that, but it's just implemented systems to say we did it to look good, it will never change anything, right? And those biases and preconceived notions are so deep sometimes that some people don't even know they have them. So it's really a hard thing to tackle because it does start with the top, and then also if it is prevalent in an organization for some reason, like what do you do about it, right? Like, do you actually take real action to get rid of, maybe a high performer that is that way or not? So it's, I think in the industry, especially in America, that's a huge, a massive issue that isn't something that could be simply just addressed through programs, right? But at Building Mavens, it never really is an issue because, again, nobody I work with is like that, right? Where a lot of us are from other countries, and I just don't see things that way. So a female, Hispanic, Black, white, whatever it is.
Right.
To me, it's like, how good do you do your job? How good do you integrate with everybody else? Are you a good person? And if you do well, then your compensation, pay, opportunities are the same as anybody else. I just doesn't register why that would be a problem when it comes to hiring and promoting, because it really should be just the best person for the job, right?
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
I mean, I think that, and I agree, and I think in some ways today in the corporate world, this whole diversity and inclusion thing can feel a little bit like a check the box thing, right? For companies, especially for larger companies. Whereas to me, I share the same feeling with you, is it's really a people thing. Again, it comes down to your people. It comes down to your culture, the people you're bringing on board. If you have a group of people that just want to work together towards a goal, they're excited to work together. They're clear on what they want to accomplish. They can bring anybody into the team and they can work with them. Yeah. Right? And I think that's, again, this goes back to the leadership and the atmosphere you're creating for people. Right. And it sounds to me like because of your upbringing and your perspective, it was easier in that, like, that's what you knew. Like, that's all you knew.
Yeah, it's never been something that I see when I look at somebody else, because when I went to school, from the minute I was born till the minute I came to America, my class was filled with all different colors of people, and it never stopped me from having friends. There wasn't areas where it was more predominantly this color versus that. It just wasn't, I just didn't grow up like that. And so it's a hard thing for me to talk about, because when I see it in play, or I see somebody, like you said, it's just a slogan, but then you're like, wait a second, you guys say diversity and inclusion and all this stuff, but like your actual organization doesn't look like that, right? Or like if you let's look at your leadership team, and it's like, we have all these programs, but you go to the leadership team and it's one demographic. It's like, well, at the end of the day, how can that demographic push the needs for everybody else if it's not actually diverse? And
right.
And that's really what it comes down to. So part of me having my own company is I just don't have to deal with that stuff anymore.
No, I mean, it's like I said, and I think that's how you want to feel, right? You want to feel like it's not an issue because everyone is on board, everyone's bought in together, and they're working together. So the last question that I wanted to ask you today, Scott, you've been working in this industry for a while now. You've worked within companies. You started your own company. You're dealing with people every day. For the civil engineers out there that are coming up in this industry, what are some of the traits or skills that you feel like if they want to be successful, they want to become leaders in the industry, what are some of the key kind of skills and traits that you see in those people that are technical professionals, but they can really become great leaders in the industry? What advice can you share around that?
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of just skills. It's like when we go to school, at least when I went to school, not much emphasis was put on maybe soft skills. It was all just technical, technical, technical. Nobody really talked about like public speaking. It was recommended, but it wasn't like let's really dive into public speaking or how to run a business. So I think doing something that's outside of the engineering world that has to do with soft skills and skills that really translate to dealing with people is good, right? So I think that's nobody ever stops learning. So developing that, especially if you have a passion for that, is good for anybody. When it comes to the person, though, I think no matter what position you are in, there's just certain traits like humility, adaptability, flexibility, certain things that go well no matter what. And if you have those skills like humility, it's easy to teach somebody than if you don't and you have all the skills. So I think for anybody that's starting or going through the career, it's a journey, right? So when you're in a certain situation, it's always easy to look at all the negatives. But if you focus on the positives and make the best of that situation, you'll see as you grow throughout your career that you're going to look back at that, and that may be an experience you pull on to provide guidance later on. So there's no role I've had that I haven't pulled back on and said, well, I had this from that, or I had a client like that, or I did see this. And even though I hated it maybe at the moment, it served me to push me forward. So I think if anybody is looking at their situation, you can always change. You can always change your job. But if you have the right attitude in the circumstance, then you leave a good impression on whoever you're working with. And those relationships mean a lot as you continue as well. So I think it's always do your best, be humble, always learn. And at the end of the day, just keep educating yourself, because that's something somebody can't take from you.
That's great. And I really like what you said about flexibility and adaptability. I think in the world we live in today, when you go into your job, into your position, you start working with a new organization, your ability to be flexible, as we've seen over the past 5 years with everything that's gone on in the world, is so important at every level of the organization. I think obviously starts with leadership, but doors are going to shut. But if you're adaptable, you could build a new skill. You could adopt something new. You're gonna find a new way to be successful. And so, I know just from following you, Scott, over the years, you've done different things in your career, but you've continued to be successful because you make a change, you make a tweak, you improve something, right? And that's something that I think for young engineers, Scott really put it well. Be adaptable, show up to work every day, do your best, and good things are going to happen for you. So, I appreciate you, Scott, coming on the show here today, just sharing some of your experience with us, sharing some of what you've seen in the industry. And, I wish you all the best in what you're doing. And any parting words for our guests, any last pieces of advice you'd offer up?
Well, first of all, let me say thanks for inviting me. Always a pleasure, and it feels like we could keep talking and talking. Yeah. So it's like, wow, it's already 30 minutes went by. I think, if I could just talk to myself years ago, same advice would be slow down, right? Do your best. Because I would never think at the end of the day, 20 years later, you're going to have your own company and it's going to really all come to a head. Sometimes you get so focused on the present that kind of bogs you down. So if I could talk to myself, it'd be just focus, do your best, build relationships, be that person that people like to come to and always has a good attitude. And if you don't like something, change it. If you don't like something, speak up. Nothing is rigid like that. If somebody's treating you badly, speak up about it. If you're feeling discriminated against, speak up. All right. It's like you really control how people treat you and where you're going. So never feel like you're trapped in any situation, because at the end of the day, it's never as rigid as you think. So I think having a good attitude and really taking control of your future is what I would really impress on somebody else. If you want to be in charge, then take charge, right? It's as simple as that. Nothing is going to be given to you, and everything requires a lot of hard work. So even at this level where I can say I've reached the highest point of my career so far, it's still a lot of work. And you can probably attest to that. I'm working maybe harder now, even though I'm enjoying it more, but I'm working harder now than ever before. So it's not like the work ever stops, that you can say, you know what, I'm just going to sit back and people are going to give me things. Everything I have to do right now, I have to go do it. I can't just rely on somebody else to do it for me. So I think that's something that I'd probably impress on my younger self is, if you want something, then go get it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's well said. And in fact, I had someone recently share a quote with me that was really good. When all else doesn't work, work works. Right? When all else doesn't work, work.
Yeah.
Show up, do the work. Like you're saying, take action, roll up your sleeves and go to work. And, good things are going to happen. It's a simple advice, but it makes sense, actually. So, well, Scott Harvey-Lewis, CEO, founder, Building Mavens, I want to thank you again for joining us. And, we'll keep following you. You definitely follow Scott on LinkedIn. He puts a lot of really inspiring stuff out there. I know he's going to continue to do great things. So thanks again for the time, Scott.
All right. Thank you. And looking forward to talking again.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Scott. He's an amazing leader. He's really big on LinkedIn. You can follow him and get some inspiration from him. And please consider subscribing to our channel here. We do put out videos and interviews like this on a regular basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I hope to see you next week.